Our genre is traditional literature. Traditional stories originated orally and do not have an author. These stories were created in the oral form long ago, so no one knows who first told these tales or which version is the original one. Because of this genre is often associated with collectors or retellers. Books that are considered to be in the genre of traditional literature involve character development that is lean and spare. Characters are often archetypes, meant to be symbolic of basic human traits like good and evil. They are single-faceted and often do not change throughout the course of the story. Traditional stories are similar in all parts of the world because they tend to be about human experience, including love, fear, greed, jealousy, and mercy. These fundamental human characteristics and motivations are universal. The plots of traditional literature are simple and direct. The common folk is typically who told these folk tales, so they often are themes of success, like an underdog making good. The character's success is overcome against all odds, such as accomplishing an impossible task. Some of the typical themes of these tales include mercy, kindness, and perseverance, justice, typically by the punishment of evil, and the power of love. Settings are established quickly and are in the distant past, many using the ever so common phrase, once upon a time. Time passes quickly as well in these stories. A hallmark of this genre is repeated patterns or elements. For example, the number 3 often appears, like Jack's 3 trips up the beanstalk, or repeated refrains like fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Types of folklore. The first category of folklore is folk tales. The category of folk tales is broken down further into the sections of cumulative, pourquoi, beast, trickster, noodlehead or numbskull, realistic, and fairy tales. Cumulative tales involve the stories being added upon as the story unfolds, like in The House That Jack Built. Pourquoi means why in French, so these stories answer the question of why things are the way they are, as in why mosquitoes buzz in people's ears. Beast tales use animals as the main characters and give them human characteristics like in The 3 Little Pigs. Trickster tales involve the main character outsmarting everyone else and they are sly and mischievous, like in the story Raven. Tales that are considered noodlehead or numbskull include a humorous story of the escapades of characters that are not very bright. Hands and Luck is one example of this. Realistic tales are stories that seem to be based on an actual event or person in history, like in Dick Whittington and His Cat. Lastly, there are fairy tales. These are magical stories with enchantments that go beyond fairy godmothers and talking animals, like in Cinderella or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Other types of folklore include tall tales, which use the element of exaggeration, like in stories of Paul Bunyan or Johnny Appleseed. Fables, which are short stories that teach a moral lesson, as in Aesop's Fables. Myths, stories that recount the creation of the world and talk about gods and goddesses, like the story Musicians of the Sun. Next is epics, ballads, and legends. These 3 types share a theme of focusing on heroes. Examples include Beowulf and the Iliad. Lastly, there are religious stories. These tales are derived from currently practiced faiths, like in the stories of creation and the miracle of Hanukkah.
A book is a good example of traditional literature or folklore if it stays true to the original oral storytelling. There are many different levels of maturity and versions of each story, whether they are for adults or brought down in maturity and violence for children. The quality stories of folklore are the ones that are still around. The quality stories that were told around the campfires back in time that were worth remembering have been passed down and retold in many different formats and versions. The reader simply needs to decide which version he or she wants, whether that's more on the traditional side with the Brothers Grimm or the more children-like versions of the classics that have been made into children's movies. Just to mention a few of the books that are under the different categories of folklore, there are fairy tales, which include books like Pocahontas, and these are the more children-like versions. The Little Mermaid, Sleeping Beauty, The Little Red Riding Hood, and Hansel and Gretel. Another category would be the cumulative tales, and those would be books like The House That Jack Built and I Know an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. And then for beast tales, an example would be The Three Pigs, and so that's where the animals are speaking. And then tall tales would include books like the Paul Bunyan books or Johnny Appleseed. And then an example of the poetry books would be the Mother Goose. Tales from the oral tradition are part of the fabric of every culture. For example, the 1001 Arabian Nights, including the story of Aladdin.
Traditional literature is important because it includes all the oral traditions that are part of the fabric of every culture. Traditional stories differ in various ways from modern writings, and for this reason, they are held to different critical standards. Traditional literature gives us a common ground for communicating and offers us certain benefits that realistic fiction cannot supply with quite the same power. While many people enjoy reading traditional literature because of the vast array of traditional culture within these stories and enjoy how these books bring creativity to the minds of young children, there are some people who do not feel this way about this genre. Some people see traditional literature as psychological fantasy, violent, frightening for young children, and a waste of time. Some adults feel these stories will lead their children to be somehow out of touch with reality, or the violent acts in some traditional tales will breed violence in young children. Many adults also worry that some of the traditional tales will frighten children, causing nightmares or sorts of distress. And some adults just think that folktales are a waste of time and make selections to use children's books in favor of real world.
In addition to the points made earlier about what we can learn from this genre, these stories prepare children to meet the complexities of adult life. This genre is a great metaphor for human existence. We learn to have hope even in times of struggle, and that against all odds, the underdog can succeed.
A book is a good example of traditional literature or folklore if it stays true to the original oral. Dang it, I looked at the camera. It's so difficult.
Some adults feel that these stories will lead their children to somehow. Seriously?
Types of folklore. The first category of
Standards. Traditional literature gives us a common ground for communicating and offers us certain benefits that realistic. Oh gosh!
These stories were created in the oral form long. Oh, sorry, I already messed up. Lastly, there are fairy tales. These are magical stories with enchantments that go beyond fairy godmothers and talking animals like in Cinderella or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay, that was terrible.
There are also tales from the oral tradition
commit violent acts and some. Oh gosh, I had to re-say it a different way and it. Yeah.
Are for adults or brought down in maturity. Okay, I want to start over actually, because I said there.